guys, thanks so much for joining us again today on Conversations with Cliff. My name is David Evenden, and I'm the owner and founder of Standard User Cybersecurity and Standard User Institute. We're being joined by my good friend and president of Standard User Institute, Cliff Lash. Just as a caveat here, I'm at home and my kids are about to go outside, so if there's a bunch of noises, I promise no one's dying. They're just going outside to play. So Cliff, thanks so much for joining me today. In the past couple of weeks, we've talked about all kinds of stuff from man-in-the-middle attacks to cybersecurity versus information security and botnets and zombies and DDoS attacks. And last time we talked about, what did we talk about in our last episode?
Viruses, worms, and Trojans.
Viruses, worms, and Trojans. So it only seems fitting today that you would like to talk about the antithesis of that conversation, antiviruses.
Yeah. Antivirus software in particular. And so let me just give you a little background in my history with antivirus software. And so I'm going back 10 or probably 15 years ago, when I would buy the full version of some of the major companies. And I had, I don't know, 2 or 3 different companies over time. And it seemed to me that when you had the full power of the antivirus software running on your computer, that it was my opinion that it seemed like that in it slowed your computer down, because it just did so much work in the background. And I remember an instance when I wanted to switch from one big company to another big company, I found out that it is so deeply embedded into my computer that I did not have the ability to just delete it. And so when I called and talked to people, I mean, that's a security feature, because I mean, if I can delete it, I mean, they have to protect themselves against somebody creating an exploit that just comes in and disables your antivirus software, so they have complete access to your computer. So that makes complete sense. But I didn't like, there were some things about that I didn't like, especially the fact that it seemed like there was so much computing, so much power of my computer was diverted toward the antivirus side of things. And I have a feeling, I've done it differently now for the last 10 years or so, and it's been better for me, but I'm not sure I'm as protected as I ought to be. And sometime in the past, I had a guy that works on computers here in Wichita that I trusted, and he recommended that I just use just the free version of a particular antivirus software. And so that's what I've been doing for several years. I just put the free version. So every now and then it pops up and wants to sell me a bigger version, but I just keep signing up for the free version. And he also asked me, in addition to that, to just run, I guess I'll just say the name of the company, just run malware bites from time to time, just to see if there's any malware that has shown up, that it can get rid of it. So it's kind of that two-pronged approach. But with the having to run the malware bites manually, I just forget to do that. I don't do it, all that often. So sometimes I wonder if it might be better just to have like the full version running. And so on that free software that I use right now, it's time for me my free license is expiring. So they want to sell me the whole version. So they send me this thing regularly that says, with the free version, I get, it blocks viruses and spyware. But then there's all this other stuff I can get for $1.99 a month. Extra ransomware protection, safe online shopping. It secures my banking transactions. It hides my PC behind a firewall. It prevents hacker attacks and keeps me safe from fake websites and stops webcam spying. Now, all of that, I don't want any of that stuff to happen to me.
Right, right.
On the other hand, I think I get a little bit, I get some of that anyway, even without buying this extra protection, like the banking protection. I feel fairly secure in my banking transactions. I feel fairly secure in my online shopping experiences. So what do you think about that? I mean, are people better just to buy the full antivirus protection, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just to sort of caveat what you said, when speaking specifically about Malwarebytes, we don't have to say it again. We don't have to say who you're using or the service you're talking about now, but it is not Malwarebytes that we're talking about. Just as an FYI.
Yeah.
And so I am, for one, I'm a big fan of Malwarebytes actually, and I think that they do a great job. But services like the one that you're talking about, which is a very common home use service, their antivirus that they have on their local for their local platforms that are free solutions are only have minimal configurations. And so and we're gonna sort of reference our previous conversation a little bit in blocking known malware, if you will. So let's just talk about malware as your top level. You might have viruses, Trojans, but malware is that top level conversation. And so so most antiviruses in the free form of that are using known signatures to block known bad elements. They may not be processing heuristic-based activity or anything like that. So when you purchase those more advanced ones, you're getting configurable elements. And so as we talk about that, let's talk about like the different processes and why an antivirus installed in your local machine might be taking up more memory and might be running a lot of background stuff and bogging everything down. And then additionally, in the last part of that, I'd like to talk about the cost per service that you're discussing and why, if you click select and you go through there, that's not actually how much you're going to be paying. And so let's come all the way back to the beginning there. And antiviruses, the free versions of antivirus, and most antiviruses, over the counter, if you will, free if you want to call it that way, are blocking known signatures. So I've seen this before. I know this is bad. If I see it on your computer, I'm going to prevent that from happening. And additionally, I'm blocking you from hacker attacks, if you will. I actually don't like the phrase hacker attacks because there's a lot of computer hackers that are good. And so I like bad guy attacks, attacker attacks. Hacker attacks just sort of imply that every hacker is a bad guy. And that's not the case. There's a lot of good guys that are computer hackers. And so I will, speaking of like that, again, those types of attacks are known attacks. I've seen this before. I know what it looks like, and I'm going to block that. So if there's a new element or you're paying for a free version and you don't have updates of signatures, or you don't even have, you're not paying for that service anymore, you don't have any license, and so it calls out and tries to get an update, you're not getting any new updates. So let's just say, for instance, the last time you updated was 6 months ago, and 4 months ago, a new exploit came out and someone's throwing that at your computer, you're susceptible to that attack because you don't have those signatures installed in your local antivirus. Yeah, go ahead.
I will say that, I mean, the company I use, they do update it from time to time. So it will do some updates, just not when it expires. I mean, it'll do some continuous updating.
Right. Yeah. And in the free version, they are going to continue to do that. I'm mostly talking about in the paid for version. If you're not continuously paying for it and it tries to call out to get updates, the web server is going to say, no, I'm sorry, your license key is no longer valid, and we're not going to give you any updates.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in the free versions, and even if you've paid for a free version, there is lots of times a basic capability. You say, hey, sure, these are part of our free versioning. If your license is expired, we'll still give you these, but we won't give you those. Mm-hmm. And so we sort of talk about like signatures. Now let's go through and talk about configurations. And configurations are really some of the elements built into some of the more like advanced antiviruses and premium versions of those antiviruses, if you will. So if you're running Microsoft Word, for instance, or anything else, application, we're just going to call it Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word generally is installed in like program data or program files. And that program files has a specific path where the Microsoft Office suite is installed. And the executable, I don't know what it's called, word.exe or something like that. I have no idea what it's called. But it's in that location. It has a hash. The hash, describing hashes is a little bit difficult, but to sort of keep it pretty clear. But you can actually get a specific string that tells you what the size of that file is, and it should match every time. The size of this file and the element and context of that file looks like this. So if there's any change to that file, that hash is going to change, and you're going to know you don't have the original hash that Microsoft sent you. Somebody's now interacted with that executable and made a change to it, or replaced it with a piece of malware, and it still is called word.exe, but it doesn't actually, it's not word.exe. You double click on word.exe and it launches this piece of malware, and then now you have malware installed or something like that. So the configurable aspects of an antivirus say that if I'm going to allow it, and there's different terminology. Traditional terminology is like whitelist and blacklist. I think the general cybersecurity community is moving away from those and just, good lists and bad lists, if you will. But, if you have a known good process that you're allowed to run, that's in your good list, if you will. And if you have a known series of bad guy applications, this is a piece of known malware, I'm going to put it into the bad list, the blacklist, if you will. And so by putting it into the good list or the white list, you're telling it that this is allowed to run on this computer. And then even in that allowed to run on the computer, you can say it has to have this hash and it has to be run from this location. And so you can actually tell it in this file path, in this hash, this is the file name, this is the size of the file, this is the timestamp of the initial write and last write, this is everything that it should look like. And if it looks anything different than that, don't let it run. And so that's like a really advanced process there. And so additionally, and what that basically means is your antivirus is going to go through and check every single running process. Are you allowed to be running on this computer? And if the answer is yes, and then you're running from the right path with the right hash in the right location at the right time, you're allowed to be there. If you don't meet all of those elements, then you're going to block that and prevent that from running. Now, of course, that's a very advanced way of installing a specific type of antivirus. Most end users, say for instance, somebody using some type of application, or they're a developer, or they write content, or they're some type of a business continuity or business development person, that type of configuration for antivirus is very limiting. You can't run something new, you can't install anything on your own, you can't do this, you can't do that, and it becomes kind of more bogged down and prevents people from really fulfilling their mission or their objectives within an organizational environment. And that, honestly, that's why a lot of organizations don't configure antiviruses in the most strict of ways, because it prevents business continuity and continued business development. So additionally, kind of moving into that phase, some of the things that antivirus is talking about, it's really using terminology that speaks to the heart of an end user. But when I read that list, I say, okay, well, how are you really doing that? The likeliness that you're actually accomplishing this in a way that makes sense is very low. So you're just telling people, okay, how are you preventing hacker attacks? What does that mean? There's like 50,000 different ways that a computer hacker, a malicious computer hacker, can attack your computer. And and sure, you might be able to prevent some certain types of one, but there's ones that that literally an antivirus, I mean, it's going to be difficult to know. And so if you have a web browser, if you're browsing the internet and you have a little bit of an outdated web browser and you're going to somebody, a website, and then they throw a specific exploit against your machine, I mean, sure, the idea that an antivirus could potentially see that if it has seen or known that type of attack in the past is great. But you're giving somebody a false sense of security by saying, I'm going to prevent every single one of these. Because if you've never seen that attack before, it's very minimal chance that you're going to prevent it. And so, it's just sort of a really complex situation where you're really dealing with tiers of exploits and tiers of methodologies for cyber attacks.
So let me just clarify. But so if there's something that's brand new, it's never been seen before, it's just slightly different than any other signature, anything that's been seen before, there's probably no antivirus that will stop it right off the bat.
Depending upon whether or not, it depends. I mean, if it's using some type of heuristics that is a known heuristic process and an antivirus is checking for that, then yes, it could potentially block that. But what you're talking about, let's just say, for instance, in your terminology, you're talking about a type of exploit. There's a new exploit that has never been seen before. Mm-hmm. We actually call those 0-day or O-day exploits. And no one's ever seen it. I throw it at a target machine, and in that capacity, yes, no antivirus is going to see that. It's going to go through, it's going to run. Now, when we get to the payload section, what is your payload or C2? Your piece of malware. Again, an exploit and a malware are different things. Whenever you get your malware on there, if the malware is a known malware, the antivirus at that point might see it. So now the attackers gain access, and in that access, they're installing a piece of malware, and that malware might be known. If that malware is not known, has never been seen before, and looks like a regular normal application, and there's no visibility there whatsoever about how or why it's processing, then again, the antivirus is probably not going to catch it. So now you have an exploit and a payload that are making it past that antivirus.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. So you said exploit and malware, two different things. So exploit is like the missile, and the malware is what the missile is delivering.
That's good. Yep. So if the missile is delivering some type of remote satellite capability that gets installed whenever the missile, let's say the missile like, and then it installs some type of a satellite, and that satellite's now calling back to its mothership. The missile is the exploit. It's gained access. It's broken through the perimeter, and the radar system or the satellite system is the payload portion. That's the malware piece. Okay. Calling back. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep. So so then let's just move on to the next section. Some of the other things that are in there are backup or recovery. I think that might have been in there. You know, ransomware protection are probably, and I'm trying to remember what was in that list. But let's talk about the cost per service on that. I'm going to tell you right now that, and I think that the minimal fee on there, because you're using the free version, and they're saying, hey, without, you know, you can upgrade to the new version. It's $199 a month or something.
Yeah, cheap.
Yeah, that's for like the first month, because the cost to perform all of those actions, back up your entire system, prevent ransomware. Preventing ransomware is either known signatures or backing up your entire system. And when you're backing up your whole system and you're storing that information, really what in backup disaster recovery and data loss protection, you're dealing and you're charging for space. And space at this point is kind of cheap, but whenever you deal with like that much space with that many end users that might be calling, then your space gets in high demand, and it becomes fairly expensive. And so the probability that they're only charging you $199 a month for that long term is pretty low. So, you know, that might be $199, select, click here, then you go down and read the fine print. For the first 3 months, it's $199, and then after that, it goes up to $19.99 a month or $9.99 a month or something like that. So,
okay.
Yeah, just FYI on there, the probability that that's sort of just a trial price
Okay.
is pretty high.
Okay.
And you know, and that's fine. I'm all for giving trial prices. I'm not all for tricking people into paying for something at a trial price when they think that's the actual price.
Okay.
So just keep your eyes open. Yeah, so I mean, and that's, we sort of talked about sort of the life cycles of antiviruses. We could go into sort of the idiosyncrasies of different types of antiviruses and the names of those, but you know, again, that's not really the point here. The point really is just to sort of talk about what an antivirus does, how is it configured, why is it
Yeah.
configured, and what is it designed to do. So you have, again, you have different types of antiviruses. You have a home user antiviruses, and then you have enterprise or corporate-based antiviruses. So enterprise ones have centralized servers that you say, hey, this is your static template machine, and it should look like this. And you use that as your template, you install that into your server, and every single installation, whether or not you're issuing those antivirus installations as sort of a GPO or a group policy within an Active Directory environment, you might be issuing those down and installing them that way. That's sort of a complicated explanation. Just know, like an enterprise domain, there's a way to automatically install antiviruses so a user doesn't have to go in and install them on every single machine. And so you can do that. As you install those, you're using your baseline policy, pardon me, of your template. And your template now is saying only these processes are allowed to run, only these different types of things. So the more or rather I should say, the greater the risk, the more strict your antiviruses should be configured.
Say that again, the greater the risk, the more you should have a really good antivirus program.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not necessarily just like a really good, because that phrase is just, you know, it's, what does that mean? But you strict configuration of an antivirus. Lots of antiviruses have the same types of capabilities. I mean, sure, you have some antiviruses out there that saying we're the most advanced one because we do artificial intelligence identification of malware. Well, you know what does that even mean? Like, you know, the probability that you're actually doing that and not destroying the RAM on a machine, it's so low. Like what is it? That's heuristic identification is all it is. And that's great. I'm glad that people have identified ways to do that, but let's just call it for what it is. It's heuristic, you know, communication. It's not machine learning. It's not artificial intelligence. If you're shifting based on baselines of normal activity, that's great. But again, you need an operating system that minimal activity is happening on, and you say, for instance, you have like 16 gigs of RAM and the end user only uses 4, and that's great. So now the antivirus has 12 gigs of RAM that it can use in order to run. That's what you're going to need for something like that. So I think that antiviruses like that sometimes are unrealistic unless you have a centralized server that they're actually processing a Hadoop cluster or something similar to that. Again, we're kind of getting into the nitty gritty of, I'm using terminology and words and things that are sort of outside the scope of even what we're supposed to be talking about.
Okay, so let me just talk about for myself and maybe for everybody as well. I mean, in my case, I keep almost all my files up in the cloud, in OneDrive or in Google Drive. I also keep them on my computer, but they're stored elsewhere as well. So I feel that I have some protection, some backup protection through that. And so I'm thinking for myself, maybe for me at this time, the free antivirus protection might be enough at this particular point in time. However, you just simply cannot take for granted protection, that you need protection and you need to keep on the lookout. And so I realize that I am not probably 100% protected by this this freeware. And if I had more sensitive data stored locally on my machine, I would probably want a higher level of security.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. It absolutely makes sense. Yep. That's good.
And also just using as many safe practices as far as possible. And we'll be talking about those as time goes by, like, you know, what to do and not do when you're in a coffee shop or other public Wi-Fi, because that'll be in one of our future episodes to talk about that.
Right. Yeah. Things not to do in public. Cool.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Well, any other questions on antivirus then?
I don't think so. Not today. Thank you very much. Very helpful information.
Yeah, absolutely. As always, Cliff, thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you next time on with Conversations with Cliff.
All right. Thank you.